So guys, welcome once again to yet another episode of All Things Football. And while we've had many male guests on here, the likes of Jim Beglin, Neil Miller, Warren Barton, just to name a few, today we are overwhelmed and more than happy to welcome Lynsey Hooper as our very first female guest. Lynsey, welcome to the show.
What an honour to be the first female on here. Thank you very much for having me. And in esteemed company with Jim and the others, Neil, I know both of them. So it's good to follow in their shoes.
Fantastic. It's brilliant to have you. We're very excited. So just to kick off and to, sort of get the ball rolling, I mean, of course, you are in the football industry at the moment. Just tell us a bit about how you got into football. And of course, as you and I mentioned off air, you are also a Wolves fan. So just tell us about your allegiance to Wolves as well.
Yeah, so I was born and grew up in Wolverhampton. So I left there when I was about 18 to go to university. My granddad used to do some scouting for Wolves, and he was a huge fan, as was a big section of my family, lots of Wolves supporters. And my granddad also used to play football when he was younger, and he was hoping at one point to maybe get to Wolves, but I think the war got in the way, and who knows what would have happened there. But he was very passionate, and I think I got that from him. So that was where Wolves came from. And I went to Molineux for the first time when I was 8. And one for you, the very first game that I saw was a friendly between Wolves and Manchester United. And Ryan Giggs, it wasn't his first appearance, but it was one of his first appearances when he was very young. About 1993, this is. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then one of the first jobs I had in radio, just as I say jobs, it was more volunteering. When I was about 13, 14, I ended up going and assisting at Radio Wolves, which were based at Molineux Stadium. And I used to help the commentators, and I used to go and get the halftime results so that they could read what else was going on in the Midlands. And I loved it from a very early age. So very sporty, wanted to do sports journalism. I went to Loughborough Uni, which over here is really big for sport. And I did sport and English. And I just, on the side, did student radio, community radio, hospital radio, wrote for a paper for a little bit, anything that I could do to try and get ahead so that when I left uni, I might have half a chance of getting into this industry. And thankfully, all of that hard work paid off. And I got a few opportunities, which meant really that I've ended up in a position now where I do like my dream job, which is great.
I can imagine. Just tell us a bit about the atmosphere for that game that you attended between United and Wolves. I mean, everybody remembers the first game that they attended. So if you have to go back down memory lane, what do you remember in terms of your emotion going to the stadium?
I remember quite a lot because you do, don't you? Your first one, you just pick up on everything. It's not just sights, it's smells, it's the people around you, the seat that you were in. So I remember loads of things. It was a pre-season friendly and it had around 30,000. So I, as a little girl aged 8, I'd never seen so many people all in one place. And the other thing that I think about Wolves, and I still think it now, is that gold strip. It is one of a kind. And when you see a sea of that in a stadium, it's quite a sight. When you come out for the first time, it's like all gold and black. Brilliant. I remember being sat near some other families that we were talking to. I went with my cousin and my uncle. And I just remember when the first shot was I don't even think it was on target, actually. I think it went off target. But everyone went, ooh. And I thought, I can get caught up in this. And there's just no looking back after that. I actually, on my first game, I had a bit of a stomach bug. So I didn't feel very well. I felt a bit sick, but I didn't want to miss the football. So my uncle kept saying, are you going to be sick? Are you going to be sick? I was like, no. I was trying to hold it in. And then at half time, I was running because I felt a bit sick. So there's an underpass as well, which is quite intimidating. And my uncle was saying we can't go near there at full time because all the fans gather, and especially away supporters. It was huge, a huge sea of fans trying to get through this tiny underpass. And he was trying to bring us around a different way. And there were so many people, it was difficult to navigate your way out. And I just remember thinking, although I should be a little bit scared. I should be a bit like, oh, this is too many people. When can I come back? That was my overwhelming feeling. Yeah.
So Lynsey, you mentioned that you in your dream industry. Tell us a bit about your Sky Sports role, how that came about, because a lot of us remember you from the I think around 2010 more or less it was. So I remember you from those days. Tell us how that came about, and how you got this dream job.
Yeah, you've got such a good memory as well. I think it was actually around 2008, 2009 that I joined Sky originally. And what had happened, which seems crazy now because we talk about the world we live in, it's all digital media, isn't it? And online. When I joined Sky 2008-9, they had launched lots of online video. So this is way ahead of its time. People had started doing it, but not to the extent that we see now. We watch videos, don't we, on Twitter and on TikTok and on YouTube and on Instagram. But this was really unusual back then. And what they did was they saw that this was the way the industry was going. And they decided that they wanted to recruit some new presenters. And I was working at the time for a football website called football365.com. And they'd started doing some video updates, and it had like the green screen in the background, and we'd do, 2-minute roundup of football news. And I was one of the presenters, and Sky bought out that company and decided they wanted to do Sky Sports News online and international, which is probably what you remember me from. And they put bulletins out around the world in some territories, and it would be summarizing all the news that had happened in the UK around about 4 times a day. And we'd do that online as well. And it was about a 5 to 6 minute bulletin. And it was really ahead of its time. It was really well put together. We did it in what looked like a replica Sky Sports studio. And all of us that worked for Football 365, we had to audition for that job with Sky. And all of us got that job. So there were 4 of us. And one of those other people was Kate Borsay, who I am still really good friends with. And we do the Offside Rule podcast together. So it was such a brilliant learning curve for us to get onto Sky. I'd also done a bit of reporting for them, and I'd done a few other projects. We actually devised a show called Sporting Chapters as well, where we talked to people about their sports books, if they've got an autobiography out. And it was just a really great way to learn. And I did 4.5 years of that. And loved it. It's obviously gone on to a new level now. You digest everything online, don't you? But looking back at it, it was a really great opportunity for me to get a foot in the industry.
Now, Lynsey, of course, in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, we've had to endure watching games without fans coming to the stadiums. What sort of impact has COVID had on the football industry and in the media industry as well?
You know what? I still don't think that we know the full extent of the effect it's had. Certainly grassroots level. And you look at how there have been what you would call bailout packages of money. The Premier League have given a lot of money over. That's trickled down. But you just wonder how many clubs are really going to suffer. And if they don't get the revenue starting to come in soon, whether there are a risk of some other clubs folding. And that's like a very real possibility. There are so many clubs that rely purely on that gate receipt, especially if you look at the lower pyramid in England of like League 2, League 1. There are clubs that really need that cash injection. Now, they have had these bailouts, and hopefully that will be enough. But do we know what the true extent is for how much they can spend on players' wages? I think it will affect the salary cap to a degree. Even though it might not be an official one, but I think clubs are being more cautious. I don't think even in the Premier League this summer, we're going to see the sort of transfer windows we have seen in the past. Obviously, there are big money transfers being mentioned, but, they are just the top clubs. If you look, it's difficult for some of the others to spend as freely as they were. I think there's a bit more of a cautious approach. So I think from from the football side and from the media side, I was lucky enough that I was one of the reporters that still managed to go into games when they were behind closed doors. And then latterly, as they started to open it up a little bit from the restart, I still managed to go and cover a lot of games. But I do recognise that I was one in the stadium where there used to be 20 media. right? So I was doing a job for the world feed, and once upon a time, we might have had 3 or 4 other reporters from around the world in the stadium. So from a media perspective, I think we will see that there's been a bit of a difference. I do wonder whether football clubs might try and do more like this. They might do more press conferences online. They might do more interviews for newspapers online, because why do they need to let newspaper journalists inside really anymore when you can do it like this? It's a bit different for TV rights, of course, because you do need to go and get different picture. This isn't going to always serve a purpose on TV. But I would have thought for radio rights holders, for newspapers, they might have the option now to do a lot of interviews with players, managers online. I don't know how long for, but I think there will be a knock-on effect. And I don't think that media companies, because of the hit that they've taken as well, they might not be spending as much as they were. So we have seen innovative new technology with touchscreens and, you know, AIs coming in. I imagine things like that have been put on hold a little bit. If they cost a lot of money, then everyone at the minute's just got to be a bit sensible, haven't they?
Football's largely been a male-dominated industry. And you being one of the first females to really sort of enter and do well in the industry, what were your challenges like? Because I'm sure most people, or a lot of the females that are watching, they want to know what sort of challenges they would face, I know, if they were to do the same thing. So how's your career been, and what sort of challenges have you encountered?
Well, I hope that their challenges aren't the same as mine now, because things have changed even more. So when I came in, what I would say was the biggest challenge, and what I was really lacking, were people that I could see like me. So I couldn't see many women in the industry. There were some, and there were some very good journalists, but it was really hard to find them, because it was a sea of men when I went into press conferences or into stadiums, into press boxes. And it felt a bit lonely at times. And I didn't recognize it maybe until a few years in, that I thought, oh, I spend all my time with men all the time. I'm talking to male players, I'm talking to male journalists. Often I will be the only female in a room. And thankfully I had my group of girls, you know, from school and from university. So I had lots of female company, but I did realize that it was a very male dominated industry. And that has changed so much now. You know, I see so many women in it, but not just in the industry, but I see so many more women in the stadiums, enjoying football, talking about it, interacting with me about it. It feels like the landscape's changed so much. The other challenge I think actually, Wasim, was that you had to be so good in the sense that I couldn't make mistakes, because if I made mistakes, then I didn't know what I was talking about. And that's not to say that I never did, but I probably made 10 times more effort than someone who was male my age had to, because of pure fear, because of the fear that you were going to get either abuse, or you were going to get told you didn't know what you were doing, get back in the kitchen, all those sorts of remarks that you must see. And I think that was exhausting actually for a while. It's only in the last 5 years, I think, where I felt that freedom. And I really hope that's what the girls and women coming into the industry feel now, is that they can actually not be perfect. You know, you can make those mistakes just like our male colleagues do occasionally. You might forget a name, you might make a slip up, it's fine. I used to absolutely kick myself for days if I made a mistake. And it's, I can't believe it now. So I think that was probably the other biggest challenge, really. And then perhaps another one as well was, I suppose, being taken seriously by the players and the managers. I have to say that my experience was good, but I have been told of others that haven't had such good experiences like that, that you feel like, you know, maybe you're not taken as seriously as some of your male counterparts. And I think the way that I would have summarized that was, I think when I entered the industry, men who covered football were football experts, but I don't think the women were. I don't think women were seen as experts, whereas I think they are getting seen as experts now. Or if you don't like the word expert, maybe should I say specialist, you know, specialists, because I think everybody thinks they're a football expert, right? If you're a fan, you think you're an expert, but let's say football specialist because you cover it day in, day out for your job. And I think a lot of that has changed.
So Lynsey, let's move some of the conversation away from the media and the press box and more to action on the pitch. Of course, in this off-season, we've seen quite a bit of changes in certain teams' dugouts. Of course, your team, Wolves, they've had a change in the dugout. The long-standing, well, long in today's terms, Nuno Espirito Santos moved on to, I'm not so sure of better things, but he's moved on to London. And then, of course, at Everton, we've got Rafa Benitez, we've got Patrick Vieira, who didn't have a great spell in France, coming over to Crystal Palace to take over from Roy Hodgson. How do you see the new managers sort of impacting the clubs in the Premier League?
Yeah, the jury's out for me, probably on all three of these managers. You know, sometimes you get managerial appointments and you think they're going to do absolutely brilliantly here. But I think there's question marks on all three of these for different reasons. Now, I was a huge Nuno fan. I think you probably both know that. And I would have loved him to stay. I actually feel like you knew what you were getting with him at Wolves. And I didn't think there was a fear of us battling relegation with him. I thought that we were always going to be okay. Now at Spurs, you move him to Spurs. And of course, the expectations there are another level. He's dealing with another level of player, huge money, huge contracts. And that's going to be a new test for him because we haven't seen him in that environment yet. I have every faith that Nuno will do well, but I know a lot of friends that are Spurs fans that have got some reservations. They think that maybe he plays a bit negative sometimes. And I've tried to reassure them, you know, watch back the first couple of seasons with Wolves because he wasn't negative. But I do think that maybe he's being remembered on the last season when Wolves had played a lot of football after being in the Europa League the year before and hadn't had a proper pre-season. And the biggest thing, and I hope that this will change for him at Spurs, is he played with this very, very short squad at Wolves. So when they changed the rules with coronavirus that you could have 5 subs, if you looked at the other teams in the Premier League, the 5 subs helped them a lot. It helped freshen things up. And that's where Nuno shot himself in the foot, I think, by not getting more players, because he tries to deal with these small, intimate squads that all dig in for each other, guaranteed minutes on the pitch, lots of game time. And that works well in some respects. But I think when you have an unprecedented thing like Corona happening, you need to be able to rotate that. And I felt you could tell that some Wolves players were completely fatigued, right? And hopefully that will be different at Spurs. So I think he'll have a longer list of players to deal with. So I'd like to give Spurs fans a bit of encouragement that, you know, give him a chance. And equally, I've got to give, as a Wolves fan, Bruno Lage a chance, right? Because he's coming in. I've been watching, I am such a geek, right? I've been watching all the pre-season friendlies online, and I've watched some training sessions online. And it's high press, you know, he is attacking. He's an attacking-minded manager. And I've watched some of the systems that he's put in play just in training, and I can tell that they're going to go for it. Do I have my reservations? Yes. You know, Norwich a few seasons ago, they were quite attacking, weren't they, under Wilder? And they went down eventually. And I just hope that if we are going to be like that, that we have a good, solid defence to work from. And I think that was the area that needed recruitment. Trincao looks like a brilliant signing, but I probably think that another centre-back is key. Like, we really need somebody. So that would be my take on Wolves. I'm going to get behind him. I hope it's going to be entertaining football and we get to enjoy it. But I have no idea which way it's going to go in the table, you know. And Everton, usually I would never doubt Rafa, but it has got the added element. It's got the added element of the Liverpool to Everton move. And I think that pressure, you know, you talk about Newcastle as a club who really got behind him. And I think if you have a bad spell, those Newcastle fans can really get on top of you. And he managed to ride that out. Is he going to be able to ride it out as well if there's a bit of a blip or a bad spell at Everton? Because I think that fan base will absolutely be on his back if that happens.
Yeah, I think so too.
But, you know, we'll see. I think he's a quality manager, but maybe that move might have something to do with where this goes.
Yeah, I share your sentiment there as far as Rafa's concerned. I think he's a quality manager. Even as a United fan, I think he's a very good manager, and he often gets more out of the squad than they expect. But being on tour, I saw quite a few Everton fans, getting ready to sort of throw the vitriol and, be ready, as you said, to jump on his back. So that's going to be interesting. Just on Spurs, I think if there was one player that would have been happy with Nuno coming to Spurs, it's Matt Doherty. I mean, he was outstanding at Wolves. He was almost like an extra playmaker for you guys at the right wing back. Went to Spurs, things didn't really pan out his way, especially under Mourinho, who decided to not play wing back. So I think if there's one player that's happy with Nuno coming over to London, it's definitely Matt Doherty.
The season before he went to Spurs 2 seasons ago, he was the only defender in the or the main defender in the Premier League that had the most goal involvement, so assists and goals. It was incredible. It was incredible. He can bring that out in him again. So yeah, I mean, that's really encouraging. It might be encouraging as well that he might be able to entice any other players, although I'm a bit more not wanting to mention that. But there are rumours.
Yeah, there's some pretty good Wolves players that United fans wouldn't mind seeing at Old Trafford. So yeah, you guys need to hold on to them.
You can forget about it. Everyone wants Pedro Neto. Forget it. You're not having him. Neves, I don't know. Maybe he will move. I don't know. The window's still open, so we'll see. But I'd like to hang on to him. But I think he is one being linked with a few places.
Yeah.
Lynsey, I just want to ask you, you mentioned that you're not sure which way it's going to go on the log, but if we look at Wolves' history, the last 3 seasons, they finished 7th twice. They finished 13th last season. They definitely have quality in their squad. They're going to get Raul Jimenez back. So I just want to get a quick prediction from you. What sort of league position are you expecting? Is it going to be closer to the 7th spot, or is it going to be more a continuation of last season?
I think it might be nearer 13th, unfortunately. I just think that there's a lot of teams now that are getting better. So if we take West Ham and Aston Villa as just 2 examples, they're now with Everton, aren't they, wanting to break into that top 6. I think the top 4 this season coming up is already nailed on. Honestly, in my mind, you've got Chelsea, Man United, Man City, and Liverpool. And I can't see anyone breaking up those 4. I really can't. And so then you've got Arsenal, Spurs, Everton, West Ham, as I've mentioned, and Aston Villa. So we're already getting down the list, aren't we? Yeah. I think there is an opening between 8th and 12th that I would love to see Wolves be in. But I think Southampton under Hasenhüttl could do well. There are other teams like Burnley, when they've got Sean Dyche, they're never gonna, I don't think they're gonna go down with him as manager.
Leeds as well.
Leeds, oh my gosh, yeah, sorry. How could I forget Leeds United? I mean, I actually think that they are there in the Everton, West Ham, Villa category of wanting to break in. So that's another one with Leeds. I think they're going to be above Wolves. So it starts pushing it down. And then you always have a couple of surprise packages, right? So the teams that have come up, and who knows what Vieira is going to do. I know what you said about his time in France, but I've spoken to a few Crystal Palace, because I'm with you a little bit, but I have spoken to some Crystal Palace fans, and they're quite impressed with his signings so far, a few different signings. There's obviously a wholesale change with a lot of players that were out of contract. There's going to be a new personnel coming in. It's how, I suppose, he gets that to work, and whether he gets it to work quickly enough. Watford, they're always unpredictable for me. Yeah, I think if I can say on a Wolves front, that 12th upwards would be great. I would be delighted with that.
Just a quick one as well, Lynsey, just before we round off over here. Of course, we'd be amiss if we don't speak about Euro 2020 that was held in 2021, and we don't, touch on England's exploits. I'm sure you got really excited to the point that, of course, you also thought it was coming home. Unfortunately, Some of my Manchester United players didn't live up to the billing in the penalty shootout, but like we know, in a shootout, it's always a lottery. A lottery, it can go either way. Did you really expect England to make it all the way to the final? And just, what was from Twitter, I could get the sense that, everybody was overexcited going into the final and maybe even overconfident. What was your gist of everybody's emotions going into the final?
I think you get caught up in it, don't you? When you get that far. Before the tournament, I'd said quarterfinals for England, so I'd underestimated them. Gareth Southgate himself said that anything but the semis would be a failure, which I thought was a really bold thing to say before a tournament. He's setting himself up for pretty much a fall if he doesn't get that top four. And as we know, in the group stages, the route had... it opened out to be nice in the end, but had Germany beaten us, then wouldn't have even got to the quarters, right? So I think I did get caught up in it after the semi-final win, because then you're just looking at 90 minutes of football, or 120, depending on how it goes. But I thought that the squad depth that we had, the fact that we hadn't played that many games that had gone to extra time or penalties, like some of the others, like Italy had a lot taken out of them, hadn't they? Especially when they faced Spain, that was a real test for them. Mm-hmm. And although I thought Italy were the better team, and I did think that going into the final, I found it astounding that England were the favourites just for being on home soil and being at Wembley, because actually our best performance came in Italy. Came against Ukraine. It was actually away, even though we'd had this supposed home tournament. I felt that Italy had a bit too much, and I thought that the midfield in particular, they edged it, and they edged it on the day, I think. But then you never know what might happen, and anything that, a free kick, a freak ball lands, and you think that's it. And there were times in that game where I think we could have won it. I think we could have won it in extra time, actually. I think if those changes had been made, Gareth Southgate made some changes at half-time in extra time. And I think if he'd made them earlier, before extra time began, with those fresh legs, I think that there was a possibility. But you know what? To get to a final, what an achievement. It is progress. The aim was to win in Qatar. So... It's been semi-final in Russia, final at Euro 2020 in Europe, and then maybe it will be actual champions. The next one, who knows?
So that actually leads me to my next question about the World Cup in Qatar. So you feel that you guys are amongst the favourites heading into the tournament?
We've got a very talented squad that look together, and maybe the taste of defeat that they had in that final will make them even hungrier in the World Cup. However, I think if it was a Euro competition that we were going into next, I would really back us to maybe win it. But what you have with the World Cup is you have Brazil, Argentina. Some of the other teams as well. Like Colombia. There's so much quality, isn't there, when you add the rest of the world into it, and we have to also take into account how the draw works out, that I wouldn't be as brash as to say, England should win it, but they should believe that they can.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to end off, Lynsey, just before we do, can you maybe tell the viewers what you're doing at the moment, and if they want to catch you on social media, which platforms can they catch you on?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for getting me on. I am at Lynsey Hooper. My Lynsey, by the way, is spelled Lynsey, because you can spell it so many ways. So it's Lynsey Hooper. I'm on Instagram and Twitter mainly. You won't find me on TikTok. I'm afraid I'm not on there at the minute. And I also present and carry on presenting and doing reporting for Premier League Productions. We have the Offside Rule podcast, which you can also download and listen. Right now, we're doing a women's football podcast for the Olympics in Tokyo. So if you want to catch that, by all means. And drop me a line. I'd love to hear from people and just find out who you support, where in the world you are, and how long you've liked them. And if it's Manchester United, I won't even hold that against you.
Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and for watching. To people who are wanting to find out where they can search some of our content. Of course, they can hear on Instagram, YouTube, and on Twitter. Lynsey, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Hopefully, there'll be a flood more females coming onto the show, and hopefully you are the first of many. Fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us of your time.
Thank you so much. Oh, I hope you warm up and I cool down.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Lynsey.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.